Right, so order of operations, right, often gets referred to as BODMAS, okay, and there's an explanation here, written explanation as to why we refer to it as BODMAS, simply meaning the letter, each letter represents something, so B represents brackets, okay, O represents of, and what we mean by of is, when we say the square of, or the cube of, or square root of, it's referring to like powers, okay. D division, M multiplication, A addition, and S subtraction. Okay, so when you perform a calculation, it's really important that you follow this principle here, because if you don't, you could easily go wrong. You might, for instance, think here when you're working out this one that this becomes 40. You might think that. Okay, you might think 7 plus 3 is 10, and then because you've got 10, you then multiply by 4. You get 40. But unfortunately, if you do that, you get the wrong answer. Okay, so it's not equal to 40. All right. What I've done though is I've gone from left to right, haven't I? I did the 7 plus 3, which is 10 times by 4. It's like when you're reading, isn't it? You go from left to right. Unfortunately, maths doesn't always work in that way. Okay, and if we follow this principle of BODMAS, then we shouldn't go too far wrong. Notice here we've got a multiplying and an addition. All right, you'll notice in BODMAS, okay, multiplying, okay, comes before addition, M comes before A. So what we need to do here is to do 3 times 4 first. Okay, so we need to work that out. And you get 12. And then, once you've worked out the multiplication, you then add them, so you get 19. In that case, we actually worked from right to left, but that's what we needed to do to make sure that we followed the rules properly. Next one, notice you've got a multiplying and you've also got a subtract. Now we know the multiplying comes before subtract, so you need to multiply it. All right, so this becomes 9, and if you multiply that, you get 6. All right, 3 times 2 is 6. So then you can take away, then you can do the subtract, and you get the correct answer, which is 3. Same situation here. If you notice here, we've got an addition, and that's a divide. Divide becomes before you add, so you've got to do the division first. Okay, so you don't add, you do this first. You divide, 8 divided by 4 is 2, so you work that out and you get 10. All right, so that's the basic principles of BODMAS, just following those rules there. If we look at it a bit closely, what you need to realize is that the brackets always have priority. Okay, so we'll see a question later where we've got brackets, but you always do the brackets first. What's inside the bracket you do first. Then the next in line is the powers, okay, the square of, cube of, and so on, so you do that next. Notice here division and multiplication are written next to each other, okay, so because they're written next to each other, it doesn't actually matter what order you do them in, okay, they side by side. Division is the opposite of multiplication, so it doesn't matter. You could actually multiply first before you divide, and the same with add and subtract. You don't have to add first, you could subtract before adding. Alright? Sometimes easier to subtract first, then add. My rule is, whenever I see division and multiplication, I just work then from left to right. And the same with this. Addition, subtraction, I work left to right. And let's try these questions down here. You've got this one here. Now, you notice here we've got a multiplying and an add. So with BODMAS, you do the multiplying one first. So you'd work up the 2 times 7 to be 14, okay? So you'd work this bit out, and then you'd work this bit out. 6 times 4 is 24. So you're doing the multiplying first, and then you add them, okay? So both multiplications done, then we add, and we get a 38. On to this one, okay, you notice you've got a multiply and divide, right? And you've got to subtract, add. Multiply and divide will come first, won't it, in BODMAS, okay? Doesn't matter what order you do multiply and divide in, right? Just go left to right. So 5 times 3 is 15. Take away 16 divided by 4 is 4. And then add 3. So I've worked out the multiplication, I've worked out the division. Alright? And you're left with this. Just remind you again. Notice now you've got to subtract now and to add. With BODMAS, the A and the S, you'd be thinking you need to add first. But as I said, these are paired, right? Addition and subtraction are paired Doesn't matter what order you go in. And I always go from left to right. So in this case, I am actually going to take away 15, take away 4 is 11. And then I'll add on the 3, which will give me 14. Okay. So this one now, one final one to look at involving a bracket. As I said, when you have a bracket, you need to work out everything in that bracket first. And ignore everything outside, don't worry about it. And in the bracket, what you need to be careful of is to make sure you work through BODMAS in the bracket as well, if there's something complicated like this. So notice in here, you've got 3 add 18 divide by 2. So, of course, I'm going to add and divide. You need to do the divide first. 18 divided by 2 is 9. Okay. Then I need to make sure, as I said, I work this bracket out. I've still got a bit more to do. 3 plus 9 is 12. So I've worked out the bracket. It becomes 12. Okay. Now, obviously, the square of 12, well, 12 times 12 is 144. Okay. Plus then, and I could work this out as well, couldn't I? The division, 32 divided by 2 is 16. And then to finish off, I've got a subtract and add. Doesn't matter what order, better to go left to right. 160 take away 144 is 16. And then I need to add on the 16. That's over here. And I get my final answer of 32.